Hi everyone, to do a quick video with some quick thoughts on the discourse that's coming from the game and movie studios right now, and it's been happening over the past couple of years actually. So for those who are not in the know, there have been some big entertainment companies like Disney and now some large game companies like Ubisoft who are getting into online battles with fans over the quality of their movies and games. I noticed this quite a while back, a few years, when they did the remake of Ghostbusters. I think it came across a lot of folks' timelines at that point. So the narrative that was being floated at that time about the Ghostbusters remake was that people who disliked the movie, they did so because they didn't like the idea of an all-female cast, and that the female cast was not funny. And so that narrative devolved online very quickly. And I even remember folks, thinking back on this, I remember folks on Facebook who did the whole thing where they wanted people to unfriend them if they didn't like the movie. So just like we've seen with politics recently, people were saying this about the Ghostbusters remake, that if you didn't like it, then you should unfriend them on Facebook and go on your way. More recently, so we've seen discourse over shows like The Acolyte kind of continuing this concept that people who don't like the thing that they're making, the product they're making, they're doing it because they have something against the group of people that are in the show in one way or another, something to do with their immutable characteristics that people don't like. In 2024, this now is very publicly taken over the game space as well. So there are big flops in games this year, like Concord is probably the biggest example of a game that flopped, and Dustborn flopped, a smaller example. So folks who worked at these companies and others, some of these folks jumped online and they had a combination of somewhat, I'd call them delusional support for themselves and their teams that produced the games, and they would say things that they, even though the team had created something that led to a loss of several $100 million, they would go on and say what an amazing team and what an amazing process they had in making that. And they'd also attack the fans too, and again label them as bad people by themselves and by proxy by the company, that they were again prejudiced against the characters in the game based on these immutable traits and characteristics. But I think the thing that happened lately, that the truth as to why this is all happening came from an unlikely source recently, and that's the movie that came out just this year called It Ends With Us. So for those following it in the news, there's the actress who's the star of the movie, Blake Lively, is suing the director. And what came out even before, I think the lawsuit just happened today, but even before the lawsuit happened, there was a lot of news about it. And the news was that the director had started a crisis management plan for his fight with Blake Lively. And so what was leaked was that there were some emails that came out that indicated that the crisis management team was disseminating information that may or may not be true, but it was universally against the target of the campaign. In this case, it was Blake Lively that they were attacking. And now the director of the movie has countered the charges, and I believe he's indicated that, or his lawyer, that there may be a disinformation campaign coming from the other side as well. And so we see just in this one movie, at least one and maybe two or more crisis management campaigns going on at the same time. So if we put two and two together, I had a light bulb moment as to why everything's been happening the way it has been over the past few years. So now I understand why, I'd say the past almost decade, maybe it's been more in Hollywood and games has been happening. So and what I think is that for large costly projects like a movie, which can go into the hundreds of millions of dollars of cost, or a AAA game, which has the same, can have the same level of cost, there'll have to be a marketing budget, obviously, every time. So it's very inexpensive as part of this marketing budget to focus on social media, and then you're going to have folks from that team in that kind of a budget item leaking information to see what folks think online about the project coming up. They'll also watch trailer reactions when they release trailers for the games or the movies on places like YouTube, and then check out what people are saying about it. So what we have to ask ourselves, what happens when these people look at these reactions and then they see a $200 million project get very bad feedback when they release something online? So I think what we're seeing is that whether they call it this or not, what the studios are doing is they're kicking off crisis management from their perspective every time. So when they release something, they get bad feedback. Just like in this latest story with It Ends With Us, they're kicking off crisis management to try to nip the problem in the bud. And the reason they do this is that if you follow this It Ends With Us story, the crisis management in the big scheme of things is actually a small cost in the big scheme of how much the movie costs and how much it can make, or the game. So when they have hundreds of millions online, a cost of, say, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands is nothing compared to what you can make or what you can lose if you don't take care of the online issues. But there are two big issues with crisis management that have come out that are obvious now, and they are that they have only one playbook that they run, and that the playbook never works at all. So their one playbook that they use is that they attack the perceived enemy of their project. So unfortunately, it sounds like in the It Ends With Us project, that was all internal. They were fighting amongst themselves. The movie actually was a big hit, and they didn't have to kick off any crisis management with the fans. Instead, they kicked off crisis management with each other, the people internal to the project. But in the case of most games and movies that are coming out, if you release a trailer for a game or a movie and it's received badly, now that means your enemy is thousands or millions of your most diehard fans of the project, and who look at it early in the development to see what the trailer is going to look like. So what they do is that the crisis manager will then kick off the playbook, this one playbook, which is to attack your enemy, which in this case is all the fans, thousands or millions of fans online. This gets obvious forceful feedback from the fans. They push back because they've got really nothing to lose in it. They may want a good game or movie, and they have nothing to lose from giving their feedback to it. And so you have this discourse online between the company and the fans, which starts out toxic from the company and then just devolves worse and worse as it goes along. This process has never worked that I know of at all. This seems odd because they keep running the playbook even though the playbook has never worked. And the reason I think that's true is that since the crisis managers are such a small light item, again, in a hundreds of millions of dollar budget, you're talking about tens or hundreds of thousands at most, they're a small light item that's not closely monitored, and the quality is not very good. The quality is low, apparently, in all cases. And so, because it's such a small light item, they will also not get the blame if things go badly. Instead, it does go to the folks who produce the work, the developers or the director or actors in a movie, in case of a movie. And they assume that the project was already doomed from a bad implementation from the start. And that's actually true. A lot of the time the product is created and then it fails. The one time we've seen feedback work correctly is obviously the Sonic movie, the first Sonic movie. There was feedback from the fans, and then the director of the movie pivoted and they changed and made something that the fans wanted. In that case, they did not kick off a crisis management. They just went and fixed the problem from the feedback they were getting. This is the right way to do it. It would be like having a quality assurance team, and then instead of taking the advice and either fixing it or at least looking at the problem to see if you do want to fix it, just blaming and yelling at the quality assurance team because you didn't like the feedback, and so that will always fail. That playbook would always fail. The problem is the long-term effect. This is the real corrosive and costly problem. Now the fans associate that company with bad ad hominem attacks against themselves made in bad faith, and they're right in saying that. So the company has something that's failing, and instead of correcting the problem, now they attack and usually call the fans very bad things to take a swipe at them. And then what happens is this keeps happening now. So if your next project fails, or the early trailers look like they're not looking good, the crisis management will run the same playbook again attacking fans, and again getting bad faith, and then it just keeps devolving from there. Disney has even proactively run crisis management playbook. They did this for the Skeleton Crew show and warned critics that they can't criticize the actors because they were child actors on the show, and saying that you can't attack them because they're children. And Skeleton Crew, the way it ended up, is a good example of what happens when a company runs the crisis management plan too often. So they ran it not just for Skeleton Crew, but they ran it for projects that failed previously, like The Acolyte. There's virtually no criticism of Skeleton Crew when you see online, and there's of the actors, and there's barely any criticism of the show itself, and that's because fans have just given up and they're not watching it right now. And so it turns out that when you keep attacking your fans, you're a company that keeps attacking your fans, your most die-hard fans, the long-term consequences are that people just give up and won't trust you to put out a good product anymore. And that's the right assumption once you're burned over and over again and get insulted by the company when that happens. So what's the solution to all this? Obviously it's to make better products. So an example of a better product I think recently is the Indiana Jones and the Great Circle game. I don't remember seeing any attack articles against the fans from this, and I think the game's done okay, and I hear they've already greenlit a new sequel to the game coming up. And that's because the gameplay is decent. I've watched some playthroughs and it seems decent, and it's a really, even beyond a game, I think as a story in a movie, like a movie that you can play through, it's actually really good. It's better than some of the actual Indiana Jones sequels that happened. And so when a company produces this good product, they don't have to run the crisis playbook, and then because there's no crisis, it's working. And so you'll see a lot of good products very quiet in social media because there's no crisis and they don't have to run it, and they do just fine. And I think that's what happened with Indiana Jones. And then the worst case scenario with something like Sonic, you get feedback, you take that feedback and you look at it, and if you decide, fix it up if you get overwhelming feedback, and then you create a better product and fans love it, and then you create a great feeling going forward for people. So what I'd say as a final message to the movie and game companies, I think we can ask them to create a better product, and then we'll go ahead and buy it. And if the fans don't like it, instead of attacking the fans, they can learn from the mistakes they make. And even in case of like Sonic did, take feedback like a a developer would take from quality assurance, and then try a change and see if you get better feedback at that time, and then run with that. So that's my take on the current state of things in games and entertainment. Thanks for listening, everyone. Please do subscribe, and have a great day, and I'll catch you on the next video. Bye.